Hi, I'm going to demonstrate using the new scale computing Ansible collection for HyperCore to automate fleet deployment tasks and application deployment tasks. In this case, using the Ansible automation platform, which is the paid product, as opposed to Ansible Core, which I've also demonstrated, which is open source and freely downloadable. This is also available in an open source version with maybe some different capabilities. And also previously was referred to as Ansible Tower. Um, this is a system for letting me, run playbooks, so on and so forth. So just like I did in the, previous demo, let's take a look at, I ran this fleet configuration playbook, which is the same fleet configuration playbook I've used in my other demos. The last run was just a little while ago, and if we go through here and look at the summary at the very end, scroll through, we can see that everything is okay. Well, actually, in this case, I did make a change. So this last time I ran it, it did make changes because I was testing this previous demo, but everything's now in the desired state. So let's actually go ahead and run through this process again. So I'm going to go to one of my clusters here. I'm going to turn a couple of things off. We'll go ahead and then delete a virtual machine, and we will rerun the playbook. And while I'm doing that, I'll run through how Ansible Tower works at a high level and how it works with the Ansible collection for HyperCore and how you might use it in an edge fleet deployment. All right, so we went ahead and messed up some things here. I could do this a bunch of different ways. So what I'm actually going to go in and do is into my job templates, which I've already configured. I've got a job template called fleet config, just to show you it's basically part of a project here. It's running this playbook called fleet config.yaml, which we're probably familiar with from this Ansible repo and from the other demos. But we'll go ahead and we're just going to go and launch this. And when I'm running it interactively, I will go ahead and see the output, just like if I ran it with Ansible Playbook. The template there you saw had information about the inventory to use and all sorts of variables and any other runtime options that I would need for the particular playbook. But you can see it's running through here, all the steps in the playbook, and there's a bunch of things that happen there. We'll kind of flip over as it goes through and see as it starts to repair this particular cluster. So actually we can see it started here, it's cloned the virtual machine that I deleted, it'll go through all the provisioning steps, power it on, then go on to the next one. So we'll check back in a little while. So some key concepts. One of the really cool things is that you can define projects, and projects are essentially how to get to your artifacts, which in this case is just my Git repo that has all of these playbook artifacts. And you can automatically sync those. You can sync them on a schedule, as I've done here. You can also have a sync done every time a playbook in that job template is executed from in that particular project. All sorts of controls, capabilities, access control restrictions, so on and so forth. So in this Ansible Edge Playbooks project, you can see these are job templates that I created. These just map to specific playbooks that exist and are executed here. So if I wanted to create a new one, just for example, I can name it. I can specify what inventory to operate against. I can specify execution environments. Basically, with Ansible Automation Platform, everything runs in these execution environments, which are containers. So you have all the correct, you don't have to worry about the correct Python versions and dependencies and things like that. So you can have multiple of those. If you need credentials, you can do that. If you want to pass other variables, but then you could pass, pick the playbook that you want to run, and you've got all sorts of things. So, limit you could use here to host patterns. If I had different groups, I could limit them to a particular group or things like that. All sorts of controls, and that's how I would create a new job template there. Another interesting capability of job templates, we'll go ahead and show it here. Is the ability to create surveys. Oh, I got to have a name. I'll call it manual. The ability to create surveys that would basically prompt for variables. So I could add some survey questions of, VM name, and store that in a variable, VM underscore name, and then pass that into the playbook. And when somebody manually executes this playbook, they'll literally get a prompt and, store it in the text or other types of formats. So you could have, basically, self-provisioning or things like that. I could have someone that had the only task they could do is come in and run this particular template and get prompted and create a VM, and they could do nothing else within the particular system. So some interesting capabilities there. Let's flip over and check, and it looks like everything is back done. And if I look at my jobs that I've run, that last run was successful. And we could go in and look through everything in the playbook and see that. Yeah, I changed things on 240 and everything's good. And if I did want to relaunch that, I could actually relaunch it. And that particular run, we'll let it go through. Everything would be green. There would be no changes there. So we talked about the projects. We talked about the templates, which are basically playbooks. There's another type of template, which is interesting, which is a workflow. So if you looked at my Edge fleet config, I actually put together a bunch of distinct playbooks and roles into kind of one master playbook. I think with this particular product, there's a better option, which is to create this workflow job template. And this is the visualizer form, and you can get the example here. I can basically link a bunch of different playbooks, a bunch of different templates together, which ones run in parallel, which ones run based on the success of a previous template. So if the template deployment is successful, it'll go ahead and run through the steps, the tasks for the point of sale, the security, pharmacy VM. If one of those were to fail, I could run a health check, just as a quick example of the kinds of logic you could put in and do here. Inventory is all managed through here, and for what it's worth, all of this, there's a good API to do all of this, and it's kind of recommended that you use Ansible or use code artifacts and processes to configure this. So you could very easily have, at the end of a zero-touch provisioning of a new cluster, have it use an API, call an API to register stuff in inventory, and then have tasks that are triggered based on, hey, a new thing's been registered. But the inventory here, in this particular case, I have one inventory. I named it Westfield Lab Inventory, even though it does have all my inventory here. So in this case, the source for this, and this could be manual or this could be API, but in this case, I did create a source of import inventory from that same project. And if we went and looked, basically, I just had to specify which is my inventory file. I can manually sync it. I can trigger it, on playbook execution. I could set a schedule to update the inventory from my GitHub repo daily or on whatever schedule. So that's all there. And then, as I mentioned, this system is running in my home lab, does not have VPN access at this point to the scale lab. So any systems that are there would fail. And if we look at some of the previous job runs, you'll see those fail, but I just went in here and turned those off. I could also, there is the concept of groups in the inventory file. I could just change my tasks to just run against region 2, which I know is all the offline, all the home systems. But again, you can see just like with the standard Ansible core inventory, you can have groups, you can have variables that are set at particular groups. So, all of my systems in region 2 can use the same SMB server. Parameters like that are all easy to set at the group level. And for what it's worth, you can have host level variables as well, just like in normal. So I should have some host level variables here. And yeah, you can see, so here I specified for every host, which is in this case a site or a cluster, what the site name is. So, in this case, store 103, which I use, if you remember in the demo, to name the VMs, and then, point of sale address for that VM when I provision it and what it should be used. And you can see, what groups host is associated with, what jobs have been run involving that host, so on and so forth. So lots of interesting capabilities built within here. Again, we covered projects, we covered different kinds of templates, mentioned at least the ability to have different roles and teams and setup. I've not configured any of that at this point. Lots of capabilities, full audit log of, any changes when jobs are created or changed or so forth. Really good information there. You can't have manual workflow approvals built into here. I've not messed around with that, but you could, have approvals to deploy some new application playbook and things like that. Those could be built in. But let's go ahead and look at that last job run that I ran. And you can see, I think these do have the hook to do a source control update before they execute. So that happened automatically. Then the fleet config ran. And in this particular run, there should have been no changes. So everything was green, okay. just like the previous Ansible demos. So that's the overview of the Ansible automation platform. A lot of capability. There's also another capability which I want to play with next called the automation mesh, which basically has remote runners that phone home and are configured into this infrastructure. They kind of show up here under instance groups, and so you can then specify how basically get through firewalls, and this would be if I did need to distribute jobs and events out to remote systems and I didn't have network access to all of them. The automation mesh can help with that. And I believe provides some autonomy as well, but I need some more explanation and digging into that. But here's your overview of the Ansible automation platform and running edge deployment and fleet management using the Scale Computing HyperCore collection.